This is Mission Control Houston. Of course, as we've been talking about, this Cygnus spacecraft has been christened the G. David Low by the company. Of course, Low was a former NASA astronaut. He flew 3 times, went on to work for Orbital Sciences, was one of the architects of this COTS demonstration mission. Those 3 missions that he flew, STS-32, STS-43, and STS-57, on one of them, one of his colleagues and fellow astronauts was astronaut Shannon Lucid. Of course, Lucid was a fixture here at NASA as both an astronaut and a Capcom. We haven't talked to her in a while, so she is now joining us on the phone. Shannon, how have you been, first of all?
Oh, I've been just great. And how have you been?
Well, we've been busy around here. We miss seeing you around here and hearing your voice, obviously, on the loops.
Oh, I really miss working, but, life goes on.
So let's talk about G. David Low. You flew with him back in 1991 on Atlantis. Let's talk about that mission a little bit.
Okay.
So, whenever you train with your colleagues, talk a little bit about the process for that. I mean, you train for more than a year, sometimes up to 2 years. Like, how close do you become, both as colleagues and both as sort of a, pseudo family? And what do you remember about G. David Low?
Well, you train with, your colleagues for a long period of time, and you get to know them fairly well. And you really sort of become a pseudo family, like you said. And it was really a privilege to be with Dave, and it was a lot of fun. He was younger than I was, and he wasn't married at that time, but he, especially John Blaha, who was the commander, and myself, we kept telling him, the joys of being married, and we found out that he was going with the person that was doing our flight data file. And so we had a good time, ribbing Dave a lot about that. It was just a real good time. We had so much fun together.
So let's talk about the mission itself. I was reading the description of it, and it's interesting, and it's kind of ironic, I guess, that Cygnus is now named after him, and it's flying after the station, carrying a lot of science, because that flight had a ton of science on it that would sort of be the precursor to a lot of the stuff that they do on board station right now, right?
It was, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but as my memory as I remember, I think that flight was a 9-day flight, and that was one of the longest flights up, at that time. And we were thinking towards station at that time. And I know we had the lower body pressure negative apparatus on board, and, where Dave would get in there, and then I would do ultrasound of his heart. And Dave was really, really into the science and wanting to contribute to the furtherance of space flight and to space station, which we were, it was just sort of a gleam in our eye at that time, and we were thinking to the future.
Yeah, I'm reading this. It was 32 physical, material, and life science experiments, and they're talking about extended duration orbiter and space station Freedom, which, of course, was the original incarnation of the space station, but it would go on to become the International Space Station, right?
Right. And it seemed like, we're going to go for 9 days. That seemed like such a stretch at that time.
So let's talk about, you doing these science experiments on board. Did you have any idea that several years later that, this stuff would become what is now the International Space Station, and, now they're doing up to 200 experiments at a time?
No. We did not know, but we certainly hoped that what we were doing and the input that we made, to the design of the experiments and how we could do them better, we certainly hoped that it would lead to space station and lead to a furtherance of science in space.
So as you look at this vehicle that just arrived at the space station here in the last few hours, and it's got the name of your former colleague, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it is an apropos name to give this first Cygnus vehicle?
Yes, I think it is just absolutely wonderful, and I am so glad that Orbital did that. I mean, I can't think of a better name to give the vehicle, and I can't think of a better way to honor Dave. Dave was such a space enthusiast, and he, wanted to see space exploration go on. He wanted to see science being done in space, and he would just be so happy to think that he was being honored in this way.
Well, Shannon, we miss you around here. We miss hearing your voice. We miss the wake-up calls. Obviously, we hope to see you around here at some other point, but we also hope that you're enjoying your time off and not working too much.
Well, life is going on, and life is good. And I miss all of y'all, too. And I'm glad that we had this opportunity to honor Dave today.
Well, Shannon, thanks so much.
You're very welcome.